I'm Jay Papasan, and this is The One Thing, your weekly guide to the simple steps that lead to extraordinary results. This week, we're exploring a very important question. Can serial achievement actually become your Achilles heel? Maybe this is you, maybe it's someone you know, maybe it's someone you work with. There's that individual in your life that's always chasing something. The moment they cross the finish line, they have to have a new mountain to climb. It's this idea that we think that maybe through this achievement, something else will happen. We'll be happy, we'll be satisfied. We'll finally have that part of us that's waiting to be filled. And the problem is, if we don't know what we're chasing, we're actually ignoring a bigger question. This all comes together in my conversation with Kim Zuroff. She's our director of growth and someone I've been friends with for over a decade. She came in to see me many years ago to share her journey of summiting Mount Kilimanjaro. And frankly, I was a bit of a killjoy. I wasn't as interested in her achievement. I wanted to know why. If this sounds like you or someone you care about, this is an episode you don't want to miss. All right, so Kim, we see this a lot when we're training with The One Thing. We've got these high achievers, and they are serial achievers, might be the best way to put it. And I always think about a quote from one of my favorite authors, Morgan Housel, and he talked about this idea of moving the goalpost on yourself.
Yeah.
It's just this idea of kind of being addicted to success in a way that actually doesn't serve you. And you're here because I feel like this has got a little bit to do with you.
It does. It does.
When you sat down in my office to talk about Kilimanjaro, I had the benefit of a history that our listeners don't. We met on a bus at our annual convention. So at that time, you were an agent.
I was, yeah.
And you were achieving.
Yep.
Fast forward some amount of time, and then you're in San Antonio, and you're one of our top, we call them productivity coaches,
Yeah.
Who help a large number of agents achieve kind of their goals.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great leadership / coach position. And you were doing so well at that you had achieved national recognition already.
Yeah.
Fast forward, and suddenly you are a bold coach. And for those who don't know, it's like our premier trainer coach position.
Yeah.
Did I miss a step in there?
No, you're
And
on
I'm
track.
like, it's like, wow. It's like this person is on this trajectory.
Yeah. Right.
And then I look up and you're now a CEO. We call him a team leader, but you're a CEO of a big office outside of DC. I think at this point, I just got angry and said, the next time you're going to make a leap, would you at least give me a call so we can talk about maybe there's a spot in my world?
Yeah.
But then you ended up growing in that role over 8 years to run multiple offices, run multiple businesses. What did I miss? Because I know that there's like a lot of boxes I didn't just check with that little journey.
That's really the journey. So you summarized it quite well. But along the way, I was also pushing myself. You know, I've ran several marathons, did several half Ironmans, one full Ironman.
In one of our visits, you had just come back, or you were going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Do you remember that afternoon?
I do. Yeah. It was after I got back from Kilimanjaro. It was 6 nights, 7 days on the mountain, and 19,341
feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, it's way above altitude. So it was challenging, and of course I couldn't go when there was no ice and snow at the top. I went when there was ice and snow at the top, and that made it just,
a little harder,
just a little bit more difficult. It's actually pretty rare for every group that goes to the summit that every single person makes it. Okay. And every person in our group made it.
You got to the top.
Yeah.
You got your photograph. How did that feel in that moment?
Oh, it was great. And I was so ready to come right back down. It's like, okay, because really you don't want to stay at the top for too long.
Because you can't breathe. It's like thin oxygen.
Yes. Like you don't stay at the top for more than a few minutes, and then you're on your way down.
All of that for like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I got it.
3 glory minutes.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So back to my office. We're talking.
Yeah.
And what do you remember about that conversation?
I think you asked me some really hard questions, and you acknowledged that, you had been watching me achieve big thing after big thing after big thing. And I think you asked me 2 questions. You asked me, what else do you have to prove to yourself? And the next question was, how do you know when enough is enough?
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a big one. And it just kind of made me pause of like, why isn't Jay super pumped that I just got to the summit?
I'm such a wet blanket.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm such a downer. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, why isn't he just super pumped? And here he just like punched me in the gut of like, wow. Like, however, after reflecting on those questions, what else do you have to prove to yourself? It just made me stop and realize of like, I hadn't really appreciated all of the things that I had done along the way. And I just kept charging hard by default. And uh, I was just stuck in a cycle of really being addicted to achieving and push, push, push. And it was unhealthy in a lot of ways.
Well, we'll break that down.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, because I know our audience,
Yeah.
the people attracted to the one thing,
Yeah.
the people attracted to the company we're both a part of, a lot of them are serial achievers. And I know I've suffered at times, so I'm speaking from experience, of failing to actually celebrate the moment. Because a lot of times when I achieve something, my first feeling is not, yay, I did it. It's, I didn't fail. Like, it's such a perverse kind of mental conversation to be having.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll have this moment of, yay, I didn't fail. But then I have to figure out, where am I looking for next versus living in that moment and experiencing. That's my wife's. It's like, okay, let's stop and celebrate. Let's savor this moment before we start thinking about what's next. So some of the dialogue we had might have been me talking to myself out loud.
Mm-hmm.
But each time I met you, I got to observe that you had made some giant leap forward in your life, right? From humble place to higher place to higher place to higher place. So it was probably after 7 of these conversations that I became such a wet blanket on you.
Absolutely. Rightfully so. I mean, I'm grateful for it.
But I think that when we think about this syndrome, call it Achievers Anonymous, and no disrespect to any 12-step program. I know people that have, it saved their lives, but like, I don't know that there is one for achievers, but there might need to be one. Hello, my name is Jay, right? And I am, I have an addiction to achievement. Mm-hmm. How do we recognize the symptoms? How do we, using the one thing I believe is a great tool, how do we work our way through it so that we can define enough and get out of this cycle, which can actually be quite destructive?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of tools that I started to really look at and utilize to help me break things down, to really start to shift from, where am I all headed? Mm-hmm. And, certain life situations, things that I went through in life, post Kilimanjaro, post the Ironman, just really made me catapult into the desire to be seeking more fulfillment than high achievement.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the cost. I can tell you what I've observed, and you can tell me what you've experienced.
Yeah.
Like when I look at people that I feel like have been in this cycle of kind of continuous success, like I have to always be doing the next thing. One, I think they fail to celebrate the journey.
Yep.
Right. It's one of my favorite books is The Gap and the Gain. Mm-hmm. Is that Dr. Benjamin Hardy? Is that right?
Yep.
And I love this idea. We focus on the next gap instead of realizing how far we've come. I know that it leads to a lot of people to burnout. It can lead to stress and health issues, and it can lead to relationship issues, mm-hmm. right? Because instead of focusing on ourselves, taking care of ourselves and self-care, we're focused on pushing ourselves to the next thing instead of realizing that we've got this support network and we can also invest in it. We're focused on the next thing. Like we're just this focus on the next thing. Did any of those ring true to you?
Yeah. I mean, you look at the social cost, right? Like, I just kept charging hard. And, it distanced myself in terms of relationships away from people that actually matter most to me.
Yeah.
And so that was part of it. The other part of it, was just the constant state of exhaustion, which that can lead to burnout if you're not working in things that you're super excited about.
Right.
So I went in and out of, burnout probably a few different times. Mm-hmm. However, it's, we don't always think about who else we're impacting by living in a constant state of achievement. And who else is being impacted by the choices I'm making today. A lot of times it's our family. A lot of times it's, friends, closest people closest to us, business relationships, things like that. And, you know, when you're constantly pushing yourself, it's also impacting the people around you in ways that we don't even consider.
Tell me more. This feels like a really important thing to cover. Can you give me an example of how that plays out?
Yeah, I think, when you come into the office, if you're a leader in an office and you're in a constant state of achievement, you're moving fast, you're driving hard, and you're not slowing down enough to recognize the people's love languages around you.
Okay.
You're not appreciating them like you should be appreciating them. You're not showing up the way that you could be for them, and you're just moving so fast that you're blind to the effects around you.
What kind of effects? Like, are you just missing opportunities to nurture people around you because you're so focused on your goal? Are
Yeah,
you
you're
not
so
nurturing relationships? Like, I'm trying to get a better understanding. I think I know, but I don't
yeah,
want to assume.
yeah. So for my situation, I was in such a constant pursuit of bettering myself and achieving for myself that I wasn't developing the people around me.
Okay.
And
And
as a
as a leader,
leader,
that's big.
that's huge.
Okay.
And when I started to make that shift a couple years ago, my whole world changed because I had been investing in myself, achieve for 10, 12, 13 years, and
Hmm.
now I'm kind of in a state of, it's exciting because I get to shift and impact other people and develop and grow the people around me, and it's just making things way better.
So I'm going to validate that.
Yeah.
This may be, hopefully this is not uncomfortable. If it is, we'll just cut it, right? But I was doing your reference checks, right?
Yeah.
Because you were onboarding with our team, and I really strongly believe in going a few deep, talking to the people you sent me to, and then the people they send me to.
Yeah.
And a couple of different people said, I've noticed a big change in Kim in the last few years. She was always knocking it out of the park, but there were times where it felt a little, and I hate this word, but they used it, transactional. Like, I've
100%.
got to do this thing and then do the next thing. It
Hmm.
became about things.
Hmm.
But what I've noticed is that she's become very relationship focused.
Hmm.
So there's some validation that
Hmm.
what the path you're on, if that's important to you, is working.
Hmm.
What did you do? You left my office, you started on a journey. If that was in fact the start, or maybe that was just a nudge that was already, you were already on that journey.
Hmm.
I know that you got a new coach, our mutual coach, Jordan, around this time. What
Yeah.
what were the steps that you took to kind of get out of this cycle and have a different relationship with success?
Yeah, so a lot of different, there's a lot of different variables and a lot of different things that I worked on. And I think one of the biggest impacts for me was really getting clear on my someday goals
Okay.
and going through that exercise of writing my someday letter
Mm-hmm.
and then working it backwards, which would really be goal setting to the now
Right.
of, based off of where I want to be in 10 years. When I worked everything backwards, I realized that I had to make some different, really hard decisions to get in alignment with being on track for where I actually want to be.
Let's take a second and break down exactly what a someday letter is, why it's important, and how you use it. What? Someday letter is a letter that you write to yourself in the future, and it's not the near future, it's the distant future. When we talk about our program of goal setting to the now, the first question is around someday. What's your one thing for someday? And that's in the distant future, beyond 5 years. Typically, when we do this in our training exercises with our coaching clients and corporate clients, we arbitrarily set a date around 10 years in the future. Depending on how old you are, that can feel like forever away. Or if you're a little later in life, that can feel like it's right around the corner. We all know that time moves more swiftly the older we get. The idea is that we want to break free from what you think is truly possible. What does your world look like 10 years from now or someday? And we prompt you with a number of questions. How old are you? Who are you spending time with? What are the skills that you've mastered? What are you focused on? What do your days look like? What does your work look like? What does your personal life look like? What hobbies do you have? And it goes on and on. The very first time I did this exercise with my coach, Jordan, my first realization was in 10 years, it was unlikely that my parents would be there. It was unlikely that my dog, my number one companion on a day-to-day basis, would be there. Thankfully, my wife and kids should still be there. but it immediately gave me clarity around the relationships that might not be there in 10 years. And I had a strong sense of, man, now that I know that I might have limited time, I need to do things differently today. That's part of the gift of the Someday Letter. By going into the future, we can discover what's important today. So let's get into the why. It gives us perspective. You write this letter based on the questions to yourself in the distant future. Jay, in the someday, 10 years from now, this is what my life looks like. This is who I'm hanging out with. This perspective allows us to understand the things that we might not enjoy in the future or that are really important to us in the future. And because it's so far out, we don't ask questions of, could I really do that? Would I be able to write a novel in 10 years? We all know that it's possible in 10 years. Would I be able to start my business in 10 years? Maybe, maybe not. Probably yes. It gets us out of this kind of math question about what is probable and isn't probable. And like we talk about in the book, get out of the probable and get into the possible. What's possible for your life? So it allows you to dream bigger than you would normally let yourself. It shows you what's important, and it also shows you what you might lose. How do we use it? With the Someday Letter in hand, we can then go through our goal setting process. Every year, my wife and I revisit our someday goals, our 5-year goals, and we make sure that our values are aligned around those things. We do all of this foundational work before we set our goals for the following year. The whole point of this exercise is we should be working backwards from a distant goal. So with your Someday Letter in hand, it will equip you to better imagine a future where you're setting goals in the distant future and 5 years from now, and those become your target that you're aiming at when you set your goals for next year and closer times in. So that's the Someday Letter. It allows you to go out into the future and imagine what your life would look like. It tells you what's important and where you should be aiming your life. And it gives you a compass today to set near-term goals that are in alignment with that. Hopefully this is helpful, and that gives you more context for this conversation with Kim.
The 10-year letter, the Someday Letter, I think you can also look at that, and it also shows you what your core values are that maybe you're not addressing. Mm-hmm. Did any of that happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, really getting clear on the core values was probably the start before the Someday Letter. Because, once our values are clear, decisions become easy.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, if you're not clear on your values, you're going to have a really difficult time deciding where it is you want to go.
So did you work on the kind of the purpose values piece first? Is that what you're saying? That's great. I was going to wonder if you had reverse engineered them from your someday goals, but you actually started with them and then they were reflected in your goals. Like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I want to have more time with my family. What are some of the things that you realized you needed to have new focus on?
I think, for some of the things that I needed to have new focus on was my health, putting my health first versus the constant pursuit of taking care of everybody else and being addicted to being, needed and all those different things. So health, but then also time freedom to make sure that I'm really just able to be where I need to be with who I need to be with when I need to be there. The great example there is, having the ability to take care of my mom, when she was sick. And, so it's starting to work on all of that stuff made me realize I need to focus on my health. I need to really live in my 20%. So getting very clear on what belongs and what does not belong. Those were a few really, really big things.
Well, I love that you designed your life in such a way that you could step away from a really big job and be a caretaker for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
You don't have any regrets. You were there for the people you love when they needed you the most.
Yep.
And so you'd successfully designed your life around that value.
Yeah.
I think it's funny for someone who I think of as a very serious endurance athlete and pickleballer, I would add. You take your athletics very seriously, but you weren't taking care of your health. Was it because you were doing too much?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No recovery, all go?
Doing way too much. Like if you're not spending that time to recover, you're going to end up where I was. The periods of recovery are equal in importance to the periods of stress. So as much as you're stressing your body, you also need to spend that time recovering. Otherwise, you're going to end up exactly where I was, in just a constant state of, you know, like my physical body. I was like, after I went through all this stuff, helping caretake my mom and the push, 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 and all of the endurance athletic events, like my body was just done.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The very first thing we're supposed to time block every year is our time off.
Yep.
If you're going to achieve extraordinary things, you're going to need time off to recover.
Yep.
And I love that Gary was so clear about that for so long, because I know he's had physical challenges too. And I try to make sure that my people do that. Like, no, let's take some time off. Let's recover. Because if you don't take a break, your body will break. You will have a breakdown at some point. It's going to happen. So you can schedule them, or it can happen in a very inconvenient, unscheduled manner.
Yeah.
So you've been in this cycle of success. You realize that you need to make a change, together with your coach, and on your own, because I know that you're very, like, if you decide you're going to do something, Kim's going to do it. You started with purpose and values. What are the things that matter the most to me? Because when we work on those things, they give you a different kind of energy and fulfillment. You went way out someday, 10 years, and tried to imagine your life. That's the second step. What are you doing?
Really, it's a big journal exercise. And I wasn't going for perfection. I was just really working to get my thoughts out on paper. And, so it's questions like, if I'm imagining, my ideal life 10 years from now, and someday could mean a lot of different things. It could be 10, 15, 20 years. I focused on 10 years.
Okay.
And so I asked myself questions of, how old will I be? Who will I be with? Like, what will I be doing? What are some of the things that I've achieved or that I'm working on? What are the things that I've learned and mastered? So, I went through a whole series of about 50 questions that I just journaled answers of, like, ideally, someday, this is exactly what I desire. And once I got it all out on paper, then is when I said, okay, working it backwards, goal setting in the now. And I think one of the important things is this exercise was really hard for me because as I started working on it, I realized as an adult how much I forgot to dream.
I'm laughing because we have the same coach, and one of his refrains is there's two groups of people. There are doers who need space to dream and dreamers who need space to do.
Yeah.
And I think that category of doers that are always doing, they don't give them space to be and dream.
Yeah. And that's what this exercise really helped me to do. And just transparently, our coach, wanted me to do this exercise much sooner than I actually was willing to slow down enough to sit and dream. And so from when I was first asked to do it to when I actually did the work, it was about 8 or 9 months.
I had a similar story.
Yeah.
It took me about that long. I started doing it. And when I asked the question, who am I spending time with? I came to the hard realization when you look out 10 years at all the relationships that are likely to be gone.
Yeah.
It actually shows you where you have hard limits. And if you don't focus on it, it won't happen.
Yeah. And that's a really powerful thing of when you understand that there's certain people that you wildly value, they won't be here. You get far more intentional. I think one of the examples that you and Gary, give in conversations is, relative to kids, you only have a certain number of summer breaks and spring breaks and winter breaks. And, how are we choosing to spend that time? And if I don't spend that time purposefully, am I going to regret it later?
Yeah. You've got nieces and nephews. I do too.
Yeah.
And you look up, and I have kids, and that was, the subject of my TEDx talk, just how hard it hit me when I realized I only had 10 spring breaks left with my kids.
Yeah.
And I wasn't thinking, oh, if I only had 10, how would I spend them? The moment you create that constraint, it's amazing how clear you get about what's important to you.
And it's amazing how purposeful your actions become.
Yeah. All right. So everybody listening, if you get the opportunity to work with one of our trainers and coaches and do a 10-year letter, don't take 9 months. And I think you beat me. I think it took me a year to finally do mine. Don't wait that long, because even if it's an uncomfortable exercise, the clarity you get from it is precious. I'm going to throw this out here as I'm going to go back to the beginning. When people don't have a real definition of enough, there'll never be enough. Did the someday letter kind of serve as a definition of this, if I can achieve these things, or is that still a journey for you? Do you have a definition of enough now?
I think, I think that's kind of an ever evolving thing because it changes.
Okay.
As life situations and circumstances happen and come, I think it changes. However, like I'm really shifted into a state of like, I don't have to prove anything to myself anymore.
Okay.
And with that comes a much more calm energy, right? If you talk to the people around me, they'll say Kim is a much more calm version of herself than she was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And just the calm and the peace that you have within knowing like, hey, like you don't need to be in a constant state in pursuit of, knocking everything down to achieve. The internal feeling of just peace and calm is priceless.
When I work with people who are perpetually busy, right?
Yeah.
And I got with you to see a long time frame of this kind of achievement. How it most often shows up is people who don't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
They're always rushing from this to the next thing because they've said yes to so much.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just busy. And at some point I realized, because when I looked at my own periods where I've done that, a lot of times I'm actually hiding from something. I'm avoiding having a conversation with myself or with my life that might be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think busyness is actually, for a lot of people, or the serial achievement is hiding from something that's maybe more important for them to achieve that is uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, for me specifically, I was just moving at such a fast pace, achieving, because I really didn't want to slow down enough to deal with all of the past stuff that I had to unravel.
Yeah.
I had a lot of unraveling to do, just based off of, from childhood to, to where I was at in adulthood. There was a lot of unraveling that I had to do that I was avoiding because it's not fun to sit in your stuff. Like, it's not fun to sit there and, and work through it. It's hard.
Yeah. I'm nodding my head, and I'm sure there's people listening that are nodding their head too, because it is uncomfortable. I remember as a parent learning that how we talk to our kids matters. When we only acknowledge them for getting an A on the test and don't talk about how hard they prepared, their attitude, their effort, the other things that matter more in the long run than the outcome of the event. Did you get a first place? Or, man, I think that you gave it your all. That language can lead to, and this is me punching myself in the gut, by the way, can lead to a relationship your children have with you where they feel like affection and value is contingent on achievement. Mm-hmm. And it can lead to perfectionism. I mean, I know so many people who've been through that where they felt like they had to always be doing that. I'm not suggesting this is your journey, but mm-hmm. I know as a parent, like we became hyper conscious because we're achievers. Yeah. So when our kids did something big, I wanted to go crazy and celebrate it. Yeah. But then I realized that we have to celebrate a lot more than that, or we might be fostering the very kind of syndrome that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. 100%. It's being aware of, as a leader, as a parent, is my love, and is it conditional? Is it conditional or is it unconditional?
Yeah.
Right. Is my leadership and how they're showing up, is it conditional or unconditional? Like, you're going to be there no matter what, or, if you do these things, then I'll show you, love.
When love becomes unconditional,
yeah,
everybody becomes calm.
Mm-hmm.
You, the person giving it, and also the person receiving it.
Yeah.
It's just a whole different relationship with other people. And I love that. All right. So, I got to get back to the practical stuff because that's where I live. You've done your work around your values. You go out and you do your someday goals. And the next step is you just work backwards from those.
Yeah. I mean, you work backwards all the way to, what's the one thing I can do today such mm-hmm. that by doing it, I'll achieve what I want to in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and then someday. And, then that can filter into the other tools, right? The GPS and the 411, and just giving you extreme clarity in what I need to be doing each day. What do I need to be saying no to? to be able to get where I want to go.
I love that you said the no word.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like a part of this journey, and if you don't say it, I'm going to say it, is you have to learn to set boundaries. Because you got clear about where you're going and why it's important to you.
Yeah.
And then you have this narrower scope of what you're going to do in 5 years and 1 year and working backwards. I think the key skill that people fall off the wagon, they do all this work, but then they don't have the discipline or the practice they need or the support they need to set real boundaries and start saying no. Because then someone says, hey, the whole gang that did Kilimanjaro is getting together and we're going to do the 11 peaks in 7 continents or whatever. And that's fine if you choose to do that. You just have to do it because it's in alignment with where you're going, not because it's another trophy to put on some sort of fictional wall in your head.
Yeah. And I think one of the filters and questions that I ask myself now is this decision going to get me closer or further away from where I want to be?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. So is what I'm choosing to do in this moment getting me closer to my goal, or is it taking me away? And that's like the filter for pretty much everything in my life right now is if I, spend the time to do this, am I getting closer or further away? It's a really good filter to help you just kind of make your decisions purposefully and be okay saying no.
Yeah. We have to learn to say no. We have to set some boundaries. I'd throw one other thing out there, and I think it's implicit in how I see you show up. You have to realize that your identity is not so much as a human doing, but like you're a human being.
Yeah.
And who am I, not what am I doing, has to become the default kind of relationship you have with yourself.
Yeah, I think for a while in pursuit of all the achievement, my identity was really wrapped around the results.
Yeah.
And that's very unhealthy. And, just unraveling that, we're so much more than the results that we get in our chosen profession.
Totally. So we're going to look back and we'll revisit this conversation in the future. There'll be the chapter of Kim, the achiever for achievement's sake. And I just want to note, I don't think you're going to slow down. I just think the achievements are going to be for fulfillment's sake in this new chapter. Yeah. And you've jumped into your director role with us, already making a difference. And you're going to be striving. You showed up for work the other day, having already played 3 hours of pickleball.
Yeah.
So let no one believe that this means that Kim is slipping into an early retirement in your 30s or something. No, but the point is, if we're going to push ourselves, let's connect that with valid reasons to be pushing ourselves to become a better person, not to satisfy some person in our past or someone outside of us or to check some box that doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, I think, I think the most exciting part is we share one of our core values, which is impact. And that's the season that I'm shifting into. And I'm doing things I enjoy, impacting a whole lot of people along the way. I say living and giving freely. Being able to live life on my terms while giving in abundance and impacting people. And, it's pretty fun when you can make that shift from high achievement to being an achiever leader and helping lift people up, because we all know that no one succeeds alone.
Well, let's test that value right now. How we end our episodes these days is either me or our guest will do a challenge for our listeners. Based on this conversation, what would you challenge our listeners to go do, a first domino towards achieving some of what you've achieved?
I think the challenge that I would give them is something as simple as, pulling out a pen and a piece of paper, journaling answers to a few questions, thinking about your goals and are my decisions moving me toward where I want to be or away? And based off the decisions that I'm, making today, who else is it impacting?
Kim, thanks so much for sharing with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kim and that you'll take her challenge to heart. Spend a little time with yourself and start dreaming about your future. I promise you won't regret it. It's done great things for me in my life. It's given clarity to my decisions today, knowing that I'm working for a tomorrow that I truly want. Stick around next week. We're going to have a great conversation with my coach, our head coach at the One Thing organization, Jordan Freed. We're going to tackle the problem of the holiday season. Everybody gets stressed out this time of year. We have so much on our plate. The kids are getting out of school. We have to adjust our work schedules. We have holiday parties, holiday gifts, holiday travel, family, politics, the whole thing. On top of all of that, the things that we do to take care of ourselves. Jordan has coached thousands of people, and we walk through some very practical techniques for how you can find your calm during the chaos of this season. I can't wait to share it all with you next week.